Hey everybody, I'm Pastor AJ Houseman and welcome to 10 Foot Pole, a podcast to dig deeper into aspects of the Bible that get glossed over or totally ignored in most preaching. The Bible has a lot of parts that are racy, uncomfortable, and sometimes downright horrifying. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 9. Today, our guest is Reverend Heather Thonvold, who is a board-certified chaplain. They actually said like an overeducated board-certified chaplain in Minnesota. So welcome to our overeducated board-certified chaplain.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
You wear a lot of hats. You actually also did, you did military chaplaincy too, right?
Yeah, I was a chaplain candidate in the Air Force for a few years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were a chaplain at a retirement home for nuns, right?
Well, technically, I was the executive director of the
Oh,
assisted
sorry.
living. That's okay. No, so yes, so my role was not as an ordained minister or a chaplain there, but man, I love those nuns. They were so feisty and amazing, and their long history of social justice advocacy and advocacy for the poor and the marginalized is like just amazing. So they were a really cool group of people to get to work with.
Nice. I love that you've done a variety of different hats of ministry that like a lot of people don't necessarily get to see. Because they're like, oh, you're a pastor, so you're obviously just in a church. And it's like, no, there's so many other like realms and places that ordained people serve in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you and I were actually just talking about how much I love the work of chaplaincy, because there's not a lot of like the minutia, the details of being a parish pastor. So like, I don't really care what color the carpet is in the sanctuary, or if, we need to call a plumber to fix the leaky toilet, like all of that stuff. I'm like, nah, not my jam. But you want me to walk into the midst of a really challenging situation and provide support for people all day, every day. Let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are, I think that there's a lot of things that people don't realize that like pastors do, right? That they think of those things, but they don't think of like, again, who you had to call to fix the toilet and stuff. And that's all very, very real. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's not, but that's just not where my gifts or passion for ministry is. For some people, it's totally their jam, and that's awesome.
Is it? I actually don't know any pastors that are like, yeah, that's my favorite part of the job.
Oh, well then, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm stereotyping. I don't know.
There could be. There very well could be, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why you went to seminary though, if that was your jam, was sort of facilities management, but
yeah, or like operations.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Either way.
Staring at spreadsheets.
Indeed.
All things that we do.
Yeah.
Anyways.
In the name of God, of course.
Yes, exactly. Today, Reverend Heather and I are going to talk about sex. So this is our fourth episode in our series, Advent After Dark, Unwrapping Bible Smut. And today we are going to talk about the smuttiest part of the Bible, Song of Songs. It is an 8-chapter erotic poem. And
that's a pretty long poem.
Mm-hmm. It is a sort of a back and forth between two lovers. There's some interesting things happening. I want to read just a few excerpts of it for those that, well, just to dive into it, but also to note that this is not in the lectionary at all. I mean, why would it be? I'm trying to think of a thematic thing that this would somehow fit into the church here. But there is 0.0 part of Song of Songs that ever shows up in our lectionary. So many people perhaps have not read it before. That it's just one of those books that sit there in the Bible that just like goes untouched because it doesn't talk about Jesus. It doesn't talk about any of those fun stories from the Old Testament we really like to talk to kids about. And I would honestly be concerned if a Sunday school teacher was like, yeah, we're going to talk about Song of Songs this week. I would be like, how's that going to go in our Sunday school lesson?
Say more about that.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What are we talking about here? Okay. So I'm gonna read just a few excerpts from a few chapters and just buckle up, people. This is fun stuff. So from chapter 4. Your lips are like a crimson thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built in courses. On it hangs 1,000 bucklers, and all of them shields of warriors. Your two breasts are like two fawns, two gazelles that feed among the lilies. Until the until the day breathes and the shadows flee, I will hasten to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense. You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Awake, O north wind, and come, O south wind. Blow upon my garden, that its fragrance may be wafted abroad. Let my beloved come into his garden, that he may eat its choicest fruits. I come to my garden, my sister, my bride. I gather my myrrh with my spices. I eat my honeycomb with my honey. I drink my wine with my milk. Eat, friends, drink, and be drunk with love. That changed speakers a couple of times, and maybe I should have said it.
I think you did just fine.
And now from chapter 5. I had put off my garment. How could I put it on again? I had bathed my feet. How could I soil them? My beloved thrust his hand into my opening, and my inmost being yearned for him. I arose to open my beloved, and my hand dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh upon the handles of the bolt. That one almost made me blush.
I mean, yep, you can't see me right now, but I definitely, my face is a little red.
And chapter 7. How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master hand. Your navel is a rounded bowl. May it never lack mixed wine. Your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. How fair and pleasant are you, O lovely, delectable maiden. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I say, I will climb the palm tree and lay hold of its branches. Oh, may your breasts be like clusters of the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples, and your kisses like the best wine that goes down smoothly, gliding over lips and teeth. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
This is a this is a fun book.
I mean,
I
yes,
can't imagine
let's,
again why this doesn't show up in the lectionary whatsoever.
I mean, I can, but, yeah, I think, I've heard all sorts of like what is it when you read the commentaries and like the question of like why is this even here?
Hmm.
Some people are like, "Oh, well, it's a an allegory between Christ and the church or it's a literal interpretation for God's plan for marriage between a man and a woman or
Yeah.
it's part of the wisdom tradition like a psalm or a proverb and we use figurative language." And I'm just like, I mean, sure. And also,
Yeah, so that's
people had sex back then too.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
crazy. So
indeed.
yeah, so some things about like the interpretation of it because like that's the question that comes up like why is this even in scripture? Like why did this enter into the canon? And so from like a Jewish perspective, they put it in the canon for like supposedly two reasons. Like one, that it's this allegory for God and Israel.
Mm,
Um, or just two, because it's attributed to Solomon and, big fan of him, right? So they're like, well, this is a sacred work since it's ascribed to Solomon. And then again, like you'll get the Christian sides of things of being like, well, this is about Jesus and the church, which is like problematic since this is like centuries before Jesus, so that doesn't necessarily make sense to me. And then the other
yeah.
side of it too, you'll get I wanted to read one and I didn't have time, but there are like evangelical marriage books that like use this as like the scriptural basis of like how to exist in your biblical, quote, biblical marriage.
I mean, sure. There's I I kind of struggle with that sometimes because I think that there's on the one hand you have the group of folks who are kind of lean more towards the biblical literalism camp,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
then you have the folks who lean more towards the it's metaphor or allegory, and they kind of butt heads, I think, when it comes to this book in scripture in particular. Because if you take it literally, um, or you interpret the actual sexual acts in it, or whatever you interpret those to be, it's pretty racy. It's pretty racy
Hmm.
stuff, right? Like it's yeah. And then you have the folks who are, like you said, in the camp of, well, it's an allegory or it's a metaphor, and we're going to try and, as Christians, take this piece of scripture that was not ours to begin with, and then we're going to say, oh, well, this is a metaphor for, like you said, Christ and the church, or
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. And it's like, that for me, and I don't know about you, but for me, that's a pretty big stretch because it's not ours. We shouldn't claim it as ours, and we shouldn't try to. One of the things that I was gifted during my year of residency in preparation for chaplaincy was the bit of wisdom that says, don't ever try to interpret someone else's theology. And so this is one of those moments where I'm like, this doesn't belong to my tradition originally. So
Hmm.
therefore, we have something to add to it, sure, but the original intent of the author is much more important than if we can know that, right? Sometimes we know that,
Hmm.
sometimes we don't, but the original intent of the author is much more important than what a Christian perspective ascribes after the fact
Hmm.
to this particular book.
Yeah, and one of the things I really appreciate about my seminary education and my professors there, as well as kind of what I would say a good chunk of how definitely Lutheran scholars do approach like the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament scripture, is to look at it through a Jewish lens, to say this is what it meant. This is like right, like we have to look at it and what it meant to the content and in those for those people, right? And that's how it can inform our faith, but it's not the other way around. We don't take our faith
Yeah,
and put it onto this text,
absolutely.
which happens a lot. I think Isaiah that happens the most with is we really like to take Isaiah and really just point it to Jesus.
Yep.
And I had a professor that like preached a whole sermon about that, and I loved it. Just like talking about like this is not ours. We can't just decide that this was about Jesus, but we need to understand it in the context in which it existed, and then from there inform our faith.
Absolutely.
And I really like
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, I
So
completely agree.
Song of Songs. There's like some contention on the name of this book. So the Hebrew name would be Song of Songs, right? So it's a Hebrew idiom like Holy of Holies or King of Kings. It's in Hebrew, it's saying like it is the greatest of those, like this is the greatest song of all, right? Or the greatest holy of all the holies, or the
Yeah.
greatest king of all the kings. But it got ascribed to Solomon, and so there are a lot of, depending on your like copy of the Bible, your translation, they may call it Song of Solomon. Again, from the Hebrew perspective, that is not the correct name for it. It is indeed Song of Songs. But it gets ascribed to Solomon. Scholars don't think Solomon wrote this even in the slightest, but we also don't have much information about the authorship, right? So it's they put it somewhere between, it was written between the 8th and 2nd century BC. So somewhere in like 600 years
600 years.
it appeared.
Okay.
That's as much as they could whittle it down to. So like why would it be attributed to Solomon? Well, he gets mentioned in it, and that's about it. And they're also like, well, he really was really good at writing songs, and also he had a lot of wives, like a lot.
Yeah. So I
First,
guess clearly then that makes sense, you know.
obviously, yeah, he knows he's very educated on sex. Um, First Kings, this has to be some sort of exaggeration, right? But First King says that he had 700 wives and 300 concubines.
He must be tired.
It's 1,000 women. I was actually just like, I
Yeah.
was like, how are we how are we servicing all these women? That doesn't even make
I
sense.
I have absolutely no idea how you would do that. Absolutely no idea.
So even if it is an exaggeration, it's to say like he was a bit of a womanizer.
Very true.
Hmm. Which I'm
Yeah.
sure he got from his father.
Yeah. Yeah. I would probably agree with that. Yeah.
Mhm. But anyways, another fun thing about this, so again, coming back to this, like, why the hell is this in scripture thing? God is never mentioned once. Like, it's not even alluded to God anywhere. It is just an erotic love poem between two lovers. With some like pretty intense language. You know.
Yeah. And there's also some metaphorical language that we know kind of what the writer was talking about. So when they talk about, oh, my garden, they're not talking about a garden
No, they're not.
like that we think of. No, they're talking about um, bits and parts that grown-ups
Hmm.
do fun things with. So
Hmm.
uh, so it's I remember when I was in seminary when and we just had like we would have random conversations and over lunch or whatever between classes, and one of the conversations that I had with a friend of mine was talking about this exact thing, and all of the different metaphors for body parts and all of that, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of those in here. I mean, it's really interesting to me when you start to break down um, well, and in scripture in general, there's a lot of metaphorical and allegorical language, but in this book in particular, they turn that up a notch. And so, like, rather than using the actual names for body parts,
Hmm.
they're like, oh, I'm going to uh what they equate certain body parts with, like animals, with gardens, with all sorts of other words that are escaping me at the moment. But yeah, it's really interesting when why can't we just say you know the words or whatever? We have to make them palatable, or I don't know, whatever. We just use different words for them instead.
Well, I mean, we still do that today, right? Like we call
Yeah,
things other things, right? Like, so there's this thing about parenting small children and like people teaching their like daughters all these euphemisms for their vagina, right? And so like
yeah,
it got like really confusing, right? Like if a little girl came home and like they're like, yeah, so and so touched my cookie. And so like that confusion of like, wait, what? Like, and so like
yeah,
that's one of the things that they teach us now is like, do not do that. Like tell your children what
yeah,
those things are really called. Uh,
yeah.
yeah. But I like that, like the garden. Come into my garden. I also like the myrrh. My hands were dripping with myrrh.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Yep.
That's a good one.
That's
Um,
fun. Good for them.
yeah. It's just like
Glad,
it
glad
is.
sounds like you're having an A+ time.
Yeah,
Happy for you.
it's like it's really graphic.
Yeah.
Um, like some of them are, I think, a little bit like harder to interpret, but some of them like I don't think anyone has any confusion about come into my garden. He says, I enter my garden. Um,
Yep.
the kind of garden that we're talking about here. That this is just sex. And another fun, this actually takes place in, like a lot of scriptures, right? Like often there's like a euphemism of feet.
Yep.
So a lot of places when you hear like, like a Ruth, right? She lay at his feet. Feet's not feet.
Yep.
Same with here. It's feet's not feet.
Yeah. Or when what is it when we talk about like people's thighs, it's not usually talking about their thighs.
Yeah,
Nope.
a little bit higher.
Which yeah, which I was very like I wasn't super, I don't know, surprised or shocked or whatever about that in seminary, but there were some people in seminary that were like, wait a minute, this isn't actually talking about that. It's not actually his thigh. And one of our Hebrew Bible professors was like, nope. And so this person had like their mind completely blown, and they were like, wait a minute. So like, how am I supposed, as a reader of the Bible, how am I supposed to know when parts, like when they're talking about body parts, but they're talking about they mean other parts? And our professor was like, well, it's complicated. And there's a lot of different people who have said a lot of different things about that. And but this person in particular was just like, it's like I know nothing now because there's all this metaphorical language that I just goes completely over my head because I have no idea. And this is not that though, which is kind of, I mean, it's comforting in a way because you're like, oh, yep, I know exactly what these folks are talking about. And
Oh yeah, they're
that's
pretty
kind of nice.
straightforward. Yeah. It's like
Yeah,
feels
it's
like
kind
it's
of nice
pretty
to know.
straightforward
Yeah,
poetry here. I think that there is something beautiful in it. Like I don't know, I don't think this answers the question of like why the hell is this in our scriptures? But there is something beautiful, I think, to be celebrated about like this the beauty and the gift of sex and human sexuality. We talked about this on a few episodes ago that like we in our society have made sex this like naughty, naughty, shameful thing. You can't talk about it. It's always behind closed doors, blah, blah, blah. And that how that has then like my brain just wants to say penetrated the church, but I feel like that's not the language I should be using here. Come into the church. That didn't make it better, did it? Mm-mm.
nope, nope, it
How
didn't. So
how that
just
has entered the church, still not better.
nope.
Has
Should we try a fourth? Should we try a
no,
fourth
there's
word?
not. There's no way. There's
Okay.
not. I don't think there is a way.
Nope.
Um, how that has I can't just entered the church has made it in a spot that like we either don't talk about sex at all, that it's just like you absolutely can't talk about it. It's like everyone would blush and no one could ever talk about it, or we like to talk about it as a bad thing.
Yeah.
And to recognize, which I think this is a beauty and a gift of this book, to say, like, hey, this is good, that love is good, that physical love is good, that, God created us as beings, as sexual beings, that this is part of who we are and what it means to be human and to experience that. And so, like, to me, there is something affirming in here about human relationships.
Absolutely. And I think too, when we talk about sex or topics around human sexuality, gender expression, identity, all of those different things that make up who we know ourselves to be, I think that folks get inherently uncomfortable in church settings because a lot of churches are still of the original sin camp, where the things that we do with our bodies are inherently bad because we carry that original sin with us. Now, obviously not every church is in that camp. A lot of them, maybe that's part of their history, but maybe it's kind of like something that they don't really emphasize anymore, regardless of kind of where your community falls in that. I think that there's just kind of an inherent discomfort that comes along with, well, in Genesis, God created and it was good.
Mhm.
And then the fall, quote unquote, the fall happened, if that's, part of your tradition. And then that therefore everything that we do with our bodies is inherently sinful or bad or whatever. And I think that the gift that this scripture brings to us is saying that you can have a, first of all, consenting adult, mutually,
Yep.
mutual equal relationship between two people, whether it's, the genders or sexes of the person is, they're not really important to me personally. They are for some folks, but when we enter into that type of physical relationship with someone else, the thing that I think is really beautiful about this scripture is the way the two lovers talk about one another. They're so complimentary, they're so loving and kind, and
Hmm.
um, it's a mutual giving and taking from each other. It's not forced. It's not, abusive.
Yeah.
And I think that back in the times when this was written, that was a real possibility for a lot of people, right? So you'd have, I mean, even Solomon, right? The concubines. You had the polygamy, and then you had really there was no consent on the part of women, right? If your husband was ready, you were ready. It didn't matter if you said
Hmm.
no or not. I mean, even in our own country,
I
the
was gonna
idea
say
of
that,
the
well,
idea of
that
marital rape,
concept still
yeah,
perpetuates today.
yeah, yeah. I think it was like in the 70s or 80s maybe when like marital rape was actually a thing that became illegal, was
Hmm.
criminalized.
And
It
I don't
it
even
was
think
not.
that's everywhere.
No,
Like, I
no,
don't think
it's
that's
not.
federal law. That is by state still.
Yeah, which is crazy. So I think that like one of the gifts of this scripture really does show that mutual understanding of
Hmm.
that physical expression of love between two people that isn't often portrayed this way in a lot of the relationships that we see in scripture.
Yeah, I totally agree. It has it is very beautiful in that way. And understanding that, like, yes, is consensual, that like sex isn't inherently bad. And I think so. I think that there's like kind of how we unpack that a little bit though. Again, like if you take that more really evangelical approach that this is like the man, the woman, the blah blah blah. But then you take the different approach of like understanding that like this is a gift given to us by God, and how do we enter into relationships where we honor one another, where we come into this mutually and stuff. And I think that is a beautiful thing that comes out of this. And again, so like talk about like consenting relationships and what does that look like? I think that this is still something that we do as a society and stuff kind of still struggle with a little bit. We talked about this a few episodes ago with Pastor Kelsey talking about the idea of like consent, or the very much the weight that gets put on women to like be virgins versus men not, no one cares. And the weight of rape and like the victim blaming, what were you wearing, right? Like that there's something to be said here about a an expression of healthy and beautiful sexual desire.
Absolutely. And that's something that, you know, our society today is so inundated with just sex is everywhere, right? From the advertisements that we see to, topics on television to movies or, literature, whatever medium it is. And a lot of that is not, they're not healthy relationships, right? So for me, it's less about all of the quote unquote rules, right? So this is probably not going to be a surprise to a whole lot of people, but I don't really subscribe to the idea that sex is only for marriage. It's only between a man and a woman. It's only like there's all these rules that
Hmm.
a lot of times the church, quote unquote, like the church as a whole has put around sex. And right, so like according to some folks, like right, like I'm not married even though I am, because therefore I'm not, we're not in a heterosexual marriage. And so therefore this beauty of the physical expression of love, i.e. sex between two adults in this scripture doesn't apply to me because therefore, all of that sinful stuff comes into it. And I think that when um when you think about it, it's really all about control. And it's all about, who gets to have the power. And this is, it kind of flips it, right? So like a lot of the gospel messages that we hear, especially from the words of Jesus, he'll say, you have heard it written, or it has been written, but I tell you, or I say to you, he flips those things. And so I think that this obviously is not a Christian scripture, but it takes a lot of the negative aspects of relationships, whether they're marriage or whether they're just people being in relationship with one another, and it flips it and it says like, here's a different way. Here's a way that we can look at the people we love, or the person we love, or the person we're married to, or whoever. And this is a much more holistic, it's much more life-giving, it's much more empowering, like all of those different things. And it's just a really beautiful kind of way of just flipping things on their heads and saying, hey, let's see if we can talk about our beloved in this way. How does that change the way that we relate to one another, that we relate to our partners, our significant others?
Hmm.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think so much of those like rules and stuff that we put around sex, um that like I think from a Christian perspective, a lot of it gets related to Paul. Um, and we've talked about this recently, right? That like Paul really doesn't like marriage. He doesn't like
No.
sex. It really kind of creeps him out, just the whole concept in general. But that like sometimes maybe we put more emphasis on what Paul says than what Jesus says. And that's an invitation to reinterpret things. You know, Jesus even says, you know, it's in light of the gospel, right? That we have to put everything through our Jesus lens. And when you put it through your Jesus lens, okay, there is something beautiful here. You know, there is a
Absolutely.
way of being beautifully in relationship. And I'll say this as far as like if we talk about marriage relationships, especially in Old Testament context, right? Like women are not women are still property, right? Like it is a contract between two men, and the woman is the good, right? And
Yeah.
so this poetry really lends to a place where like no, she is an equal partner in this relationship. um, Feminist scholars really love this book because of that, right? That like we're taking the woman has the same autonomy as the man in this poetry, and that is significant as far as
Absolutely.
how we understand sexuality and sex, especially around women. And actually, there's a lot of scholars that think that this was written by a woman because of how the language that they use and how it is so equal. Which even to me, that just
That's
like breaks down the evangelical interpretation of like this is what your marriage should look like, because like it's more equal than they give in that.
absolutely. I was actually going to mention that. But I think it's kind of funny because I have a sweatshirt that I was wearing today that says bodily autonomy is a human right. So there we go. There's there's a very clear idea of what my perspective is on that. But yeah, I think that, when historically, when you have an entire group of folks, so in this case, women, or you could say people assigned female at birth, or, however we want to word that.
I think just
Um,
people who are not um cisgender males.
there we go. So there's all of these rules around women as property, women, as servants, as workers, as all of these different things. But there's really very rarely talked about women as, I mean, obviously there are some examples that we get, but it's not that. women are not generally talked about as strong or as leaders or as uh, you know, the folks like the founders of the church, like they're
Hmm.
not talked about in ways um that are, I mean, even respectful, right? Like
Hmm.
a lot of times in scripture when people are just
Or how about just
frankly
like
like,
that women are never given names?
yes, yes, you know, and that's so that's so messed up. Number one, right? Like we don't even know like the names of half the folks in scripture practically, but and not literally half, but there's quite a few folks in scripture that we hear about, but we don't actually know who they are. We have no historical context for a whole
Hmm.
lot about them. Um, and that's a shame, right? Like I think that there are a lot of things that have been lost over the centuries, that would be really enlightening for us as Christians, but just as people in general. Like I wonder what it would be like if, all of the women who did things back in biblical times actually got credit for all the stuff that they did, for all the work that
Yeah.
they did, all of the support that they gave, Jesus and the disciples. Or one thing that I really really love is, when not to go too off topic necessarily, but like when Jesus was resurrected, the entirety of the church, right, were the women that he appeared to first.
Yeah.
That at one point in time they were the entirety of the Christian church, and therefore, but that perspective is a distinct minority. It's not usually upheld by as a way of looking at the role of women in the church. It's typically, well, yeah, but they were just messengers. Sure, that's an important thing. Yes, they did have a message, but they were also the entirety of the Christian church at one point in time, at the very, very beginning. And
I
that's
pre
significant.
Well, I mean, like, my lens of things, but like, I preach that to understand, like, listen, God could have done a lot of things, and this is how God chose to do that. And while all of the
Yep,
men were hiding in a little room, the women were the ones who showed up.
absolutely. Yep.
So yes, that does aid into why like feminist scholars really love this because it gives that credit to women where it doesn't often get accredited to in other places in our scripture.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So the big question, why is this in our scripture? Um, I read a lot of things with a lot of responses that I was like, nah, not buying it. Someone's still got to give me something good here. And I finally found one response that didn't suck.
All right,
And
hit
they
me.
said, even though our relationships are often distorted by selfishness, love is a transcendent gift meant to show us something greater, the gift of God's love that will one day be permeate and transform this beloved world.
Hmm.
So the idea is that like it points to love, right? So the ending
Yeah.
in well, first of all, it ends in a weird way, but like the sort of like the summary and the conclusion is that, love is stronger than death. It's like fire and it cannot be quenched by many waters, blah, blah, blah. That the idea is that, if we look towards love, that is the healthy response, that is the Christian or faithful response to God and God's people. And this is one expression of that.
I think that yeah, I can get down with that. I think that that makes a lot of sense. And and the thing
Because I
is,
don't buy
like,
the
we
metaphors or the allegories about Christ or the church or about,
no.
any of that. But
Yeah.
if there is a deeper meaning, right, to look to love and that is physical expressions of our love are valid and that part of being in relationship with other humans means that. And so if we exemplify a positive expression of physical love, um, that is indeed pointing us towards the love of God.
Well, and I think too that it also, kind of going along with that idea, like I think that I mean, I know a lot of clergy colleagues of mine who really think that God is love and that love is the greatest gift that we have been given by God. And so I know that when like in the final chapter, I can't remember the verse, but it's in chapter 8 in this scripture. There's a sentence that or a verse that says, many waters cannot quench love,
Hmm.
nor can rivers sweep it away. And I think that that's a really beautiful image to just keep us, just to remind us that that can also be seen as a reflection of the divine power of love, or just the power of love between people that that can overcome, you know, death, that can overcome the chaos of life, that can overcome anxiety and all of these different things. And what a tremendous gift that God has given us, in allowing us to be beings who can love, and who can express love, and in ways that are both physical and not physical. So we don't necessarily have to talk about love just equating love and sex, because those two things are not the same.
Hmm.
Um, they can be connected concepts, right? But at the same time, like they're not mutually exclusive. And so I think that when we think about the gift that we have received from God, that divine gift of love is really a powerful, number one, obviously it's a powerful gift, but obviously like it also is um, a really powerful agent for change, and for
Mm.
allowing the right what could be or what should be, the way that we really treat one another and the way that we see our role in the greater human story. Focusing on that divine gift of love is really central to a lot of theologies and a lot of the clergy colleagues that I have. The concept of love is really central to who they know God to be and who they know Jesus to be, and how they experience, whether you're a Trinitarian church or not, but whether like how you experience love comes from
Hmm.
God. And so I think that that's a really powerful way to think about, if we talk about the why of why this scripture is in here. I mean, sure, that could be part of it. Um, but at the same time, it's that divine power of love is really central for me when I think about this scripture.
Yeah, I agree. And understanding like physical manifestations of love in humans and how that looks for us and how that shapes our relationships. We have
Absolutely.
talked about sex a lot in this Advent series, and I hope everyone has a nice steamy Christmas. But to say that like we we struggle, I think, as a church to talk about and to own these things, not only in scripture, but also in who we are as beings, as beloved children of God, and what that means in our totality, that there's not some part of us that's just inherently bad for having these feelings and desires and all that kind of good stuff. But to say that like there is love at the root of it, and that I think is the important piece.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Reverend Heather, for
Yeah,
joining us on
this
this.
has been great.
I had to do some convincing to Heather to be like, listen, let's talk about sex. And thank you for
Yeah.
finally agreeing
Yeah,
to my
and
pestering
the
to do this.
well, and the convincing was not necessarily because of the topic of sex. It was the fact that I do not consider myself to be anything remotely close to a biblical scholar. So I was like, I'm not sure that I'm the right person for this. And you were like, no, you absolutely are. It's like, okay, fine.
100%. And I think everything that you said was fantastic and very biblically scholarly. So we're great. We're on perfect track. Anyways,
All right. Sounds
thanks
good.
everyone. We hope that you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I will be back sometime in the new year. I haven't worked out that schedule yet. It's November, and that's a long time away for me in my life. January is really not that far away, but it is for me personally. But anyways, we'll be back sometime in the new year. We're going to give our clergy a little bit of a break because this time of the year is very daunting. And so try not to ask too much of my colleagues. So we will be back in the new year, but I hope you have a wonderful year. And thank you for diving into this very fun topic with all of us through this Advent series. All right, everyone. Merry Christmas and take care.